Hello, friends, and welcome back to Book Banter. Today, we are talking with historical fiction author Kelsey Gietl. Kelsey and I became friends several years back when we were both navigating the journey of releasing our first novels. Though we've never met in person, thank heavens for FaceTime, our connection through the love of a good story, our obsession with historical research, and our mutual appreciation for one another's talents keep us growing and learning together. Kelsey has just released her fourth novel, Unsettled Shores, and I'm super excited to talk with her about this story as I was instantly drawn into the setting and the character's journey. So please, let's welcome Kelsey to Book Banter.
Hi, Tanya.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm really so excited to talk about Unsettled Shores because it was such a good read, and I literally, from the first version that I got to read all the way through to the final product, I was emotionally invested in the character's journey. So well done, great job. So I'm going to dive straight in. I was hooked by the stunning prologue, and I have to say, I'm not usually so enamored with prologues. I'm kind of on the fence of prologues. Do we need them? Do we not need them? But I could barely put the story down until the end. And I think it was because the prologue just put me so instantly in London on the cobbles. I could feel the ride. I could, see what she was seeing, what Josie was seeing, and it was stunning. So tell me a little bit about your writing process for Unsettled Shores. I know your process isn't quite as linear as readers might think. So give us a little bit of insight into what that looks like for you.
Sure. So it's funny that you say that you don't like prologues or in general don't like prologues, because I did a lot of research on that after my first two books, the Over the Atlantic duology. When I was coming into this one, the War Across Waters duology, just seeing, okay, so should I have prologues because I used them in my first two or not? And it seemed like readers were very mixed, but a lot of them didn't care for prologues. However, I love prologues. I think it really just puts you into the mood of the story and gets you where you need to be, assuming they're done correctly. Sometimes prologues can just kind of drag and you're not really sure where you're supposed to go. But with this first prologue in Unsettled Shores, which is from the point of view of Josie, who lives in London, and we're getting her impressions of London right after an air raid. Mm-hmm. And this was probably the first prologue that I wrote that I liked right away. Usually I hate first chapters. I write them 15,000 times. Because it's just really hard to write a first chapter and suck your readers in. Yeah. But this one just clicked for me for some reason. I really enjoyed writing the description and how she's riding her bike through the streets of London, and she can smell the smoke and the dust in her hair and see the aftermath from the air raids and really think about how she's been living in this sort of hell for 3 years. Yeah. She's just lost her father. He went off to war and never returned. So I found it to work very well. So I'm hoping my readers will too, like you said. Back to my writing process, which I think I just pretty much explained it to you by going completely off track, is that my process is chaotic. I do not write in a linear fashion. I'm not one of those authors that starts at chapter 1 and goes to the end. If I did that, it would be writer's block every day. I do write an outline, and I try to stick to that outline, but as I'm sure you know, characters do what characters want to do. Yep. And they will decide where the story is going to go. So I pretty much write in the beginning stages. I write whatever chapter comes to me. Whatever I'm inspired on that day is what I'm writing. And sometimes that means I'm writing chapter 25, and then I have to go back and write chapter 3 again and again and again, because I keep writing the ending. For Unsettled Shores, I'm not going to give a spoiler, but there's a chapter towards the end where two of the male characters are speaking, and you're not really sure if one of them is going to make it out alive. And that was the very first chapter that I wrote for this entire book, which is, I don't know, maybe 30 chapters from the end, or not 30 chapters, sorry, 30 pages from the end. But I wrote that during Broken Lines. Like, I was halfway through Broken Lines and I wrote that chapter. So it's,
wow.
You never know how it's going to end up.
And so that literally has to carry you through. Like, you were writing Broken Lines, and so, but you had this other idea, and that literally had to carry you through plotting the next novel.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
So we'll see how this next, so I'm starting the plotting for my next series, and we'll see how it goes, because this one's going to be, I'm going to try to make this a little bit different in that I'm trying to plot the whole series before I write the first one, so that I can have more foreshadowing as we're going along and giving different hints of what is to come. So we'll see if the characters let me do that or not.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because the way that we may plot, but then if you release book 1, but then it foreshadows something that you don't have in book 2, you really do have to work a little harder to make it fit, because you've already told the reader that this is kind of what's happening. So you got to continue on with it, right? So it's a challenge, and characters have a mind of their own. They're like, toddlers past nap time sometimes. So for Unsettled Shores, it's the second novel in your War Across Waters duo, but it is the 4th title in your Hope or High Water series. So they're like, it's 2 duos in a 4-book series. So how do the novels link up, and what order should a reader enjoy the series in?
Okay, so I can give you an easy answer to how they link up, and then I'm going to give you a little more vague of an answer to what order you should read them in. So how they link up is, so it's one world, the Hope or High Water world, and all the books are set in the 1910s. So the first 2 books, Across Oceans and Twisted River, which make up the Over the Atlantic duo, those, I call them more my Edwardian books, in that they start in Edwardian England, and then they move over to St. Louis, Missouri for the second book. I'm from St. Louis, so it was a lot of fun to write that one, and Broken Lines are both set in St. Louis. And then 2 of the minor characters from the first 2 books then become main characters in the second 2, in Broken Lines and Unsettled Shores. And there are also some other characters that cross over. However, a lot of my beta readers have told me, and I think I would agree, that you can really read them in any order.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you necessarily a suggested order to read them in, because I want you to decide for yourself. I have talked to people who have started with each of the 4 books and all enjoyed it. I personally feel like, as an author, I've developed a lot over the course of these 4 books, and the writing style gets better.
It does. Yeah, but it was.
I mean, I still liked Across Oceans. Yeah. So I think it kind of depends on, if you like Edwardian type of books, start with Across Oceans. If you like more of the domesticity, and there's a little bit of secrets and family saga of the early 1910s, start with Twisted River. And if you like World War I, then I would suggest starting with Broken Lines. Or if you want to, so that one takes place on the home front here in America, whereas Unsettled Shores takes place overseas. So if you prefer overseas, start with that one, read the rest as prequels.
It's actually quite brilliant, and you probably didn't necessarily
I did not intend to do that.
But it really does appeal to a lot of readers, and it takes you through this journey of different settings, creating a lot more research for yourself. And in fact, like setting part of the story in France, that's a real commitment as a historical fiction author. For historical accuracy, I am well aware of the desire to create the most real life rendering for readers. But what is your approach when it came to weaving the historical details into Unsettled Shores fictional telling?
So my approach to writing history is that I like character-driven novels. So for me, the characters always come first. I get them settled and figure out what they're about. What do they want in this world? Because ultimately, I feel like the setting changes, but really people are the same throughout history. Like we are still dealing with the same stuff now that they dealt with back then. And there are a lot of instances, there's a lot of topics that I deal with that I or people I know have dealt with in real life. So once I figure out my characters and their motivations, then I weave that into the history of the day. Now, sometimes I come across historical tidbits that are just great that I have to put in there. But for instance, Broken Lines and Unsettled Shores, the characters are from St. Louis, and there was a lot of German discrimination in St. Louis, and I mean, all over the United States. But I was able to actually like look at things from my own hometown. And so I felt like that made it more personal for me. As far as writing from France, you are right. That is a commitment because there are lots of books written overseas in France during World War I. And I have never been to France. I'll admit it. Maybe someday I'll go. We'll see. So I relied a lot on research, reading firsthand accounts. I talked to a few friends who have lived over in France for a period of time, and they were great because they gave me more of an idea of how the culture is, the differences between, I found out that like, if you live in the heart of Paris, there's a very different mindset there than if you're living out in the countryside. And they have very strong opinions about one another.
Oh, really?
And so that I had no idea. Unsettled Shores takes place in the countryside of France. So I read about more of the commoners of World War I, and it seemed like, and I'm sure this is not true for everyone, but it seemed like they were not as affected as those in the heart of, say, Paris,
right,
because the air raids were focused more on the big cities as opposed to the outskirts. But they definitely still felt the impact.
And that makes sense too, because the big city was the target for where the concentration of people were, but also where the concentration of power, of building, of art, of all those things that the other side wanted. So that makes sense. But that's interesting that they have such a different view of one another. Huh. So, so that being said, a lot of the things that happened in France in the war were, out in the country, like the Battle of Somme was not in the middle of Paris. And that is one of the scenes that has remained with me since I finished reading the book like months ago. And it was when the characters are standing on the grounds of the Battle of Somme, and it's deeply moving and it's poignant, and I just found myself immersed, and I was actually a little unnerved by the visual that you created, because I don't think I've done as much research in World War I personally. So I came away with a much greater understanding of what it might have felt like to be someone experiencing World War I overseas. I can only imagine how challenging it was, both emotionally and writing-wise, to convey such a well-known historical fact. And did you find yourself needing to approach the particular element of the story in a different way, given that the Battle of Somme is such a famous historic site as the worst battle in World War I? Or did the research and the characters just sort of pour out of you for that? Like, how did you approach? Like, I'd be worried. Personally, I'd be worried about getting it wrong. And you got it so right.
Well, now I'm thinking about getting it wrong. So thanks.
Sorry,
No.
didn't mean to put that in your head.
So yes, this scene was incredibly emotional for me to write, and thankfully and again, I don't want to give away a spoiler for anyone, but thankfully the characters that are involved in this scene just were wonderful and kind of told me their story as I was going. That's not true for all characters, but it was for them. And this is really a turning point in the story for these particular characters, of them really realizing what this war means to them and what it means to the world, and how they're going to go about approaching it from this point forward, because they didn't have a clear-cut idea of what they were going for to this point, and now they do. Yep. And I did a lot of research on the area and on the Somme, and in particular online, again, since I haven't been there, I went online, and there were several websites where you could kind of virtually tour. There were a lot of photographs. Ooh. And you could look at all these photographs from now and from then. And what really struck me was how it hasn't changed a ton. The battlefields, obviously, like, it's not just mud and craters and water and all that. There's grass now, but you can still see where a lot of those shells left craters all over the landscape, even now. And there are trenches there even now. And there are a lot of areas, not just in that part of France, but there are different parts of France where nothing, like, they are so devastated by World War I that you can't live there. Like, the landscape is ruined. The gases that they used have pretty much, like, you can't live there. It's like a dead zone, essentially. And so that for me was just, I mean, heartbreaking to see that 100 years later, like, I still felt like you were kind of there. So that definitely gave me inspiration for writing it. There was also a song that I listened to a lot that will probably make you cry when you listen to it, but it's actually a modern song by Carrie Underwood called Just a Dream.
Yes.
And it's about a woman who is engaged, or they don't really tell you if she's already married or not, but she, we'll say it's her husband. Her husband goes off to war and gets killed in combat. And so the video it starts out with her in a wedding dress, and then she kind of morphs into a black gown at the funeral. And the whole thing is about, this is a dream. I can't wake up, and that kind of thing. And I listened to that a lot because that gave me inspiration for how I needed to feel.
You know, it's interesting because I've heard the song and I've never quite made the connection, but that's really interesting.
Go watch the music video.
Okay, this is just probably how old I am. I didn't actually realize we were still producing music videos until a couple of months ago. So I thought that was like an 80s, 90s thing, and then we were done. I didn't realize that it was still happening. So I'm just going back to do that. So now I'll go look that up. See all the things I'm learning from literally from these interviews, because I learned this on an interview with Tara Travis where she told me about Country Thunder and how her puppets were featured in the video. And I was like, video? Okay. I'm going to go check this out. And it's really cute. So I will check that out. So Unsettled Shores takes us from New York to London to France, and also travels back and forth a bit between character timelines until the characters all meet forward and go together in one direction. To me, this is a plotting nightmare. What was the biggest challenge in crafting those differing elements, and how did you keep it straight in your head? Like, I would have Post-it notes everywhere.
So as we've discussed, I write chaotically.
That's how your head is.
That is inside my head. And actually, so I saw somebody had posted a meme where it said something about, you ask me how I can write a book with all these characters and all these plots and keep it all, like, how do I keep it all straight? And then the person says, well, who are you? What's your name? What day is it? I don't know where I am. Like, sometimes it just kind of takes over.
That's very true. When you're in the flow of writing, you don't know the reality of the world around you necessarily.
But I have notebooks. I have a note on my phone. Like, it's just, there's stuff everywhere. But for the dual timeline perspective, because that was something new that I had not done before, but I read a fictional books by other people. You have a dual timeline book, which was helpful. So that was probably my best. That's probably my best tool that I used, was just seeing how other people fit things together and then just kind of rolled with it.
I think what made it, in my head, made it more complicated, but I recognize this about your brilliance, is that you actually are spurred on by things that appear complicated to others. You like grab them, and go, yeah, let's do this. And I go, how? And then you make it happen, it's quite amazing. I have to say, your talent is something else, because to be able to write in different areas of a book and just go back and forth and plunk it just means that your brain is always working in the background on your stories, which is really, really, that's a great place to be. It's like, the imaginary friends came and you were allowed to play with them. So,
and then they just never leave. So
sometimes it depends on where you're at. Yeah, I'm currently going through a period where my imaginary friends and I aren't really playing very well together. So, but we're going to fix that really soon. And it's just, I think I just needed a little bit more of a break, but it's because my friends like to play at 3 a.m. and I think I like more sleep. So,
well, this next series that I'm writing, the big idea that I like, the piece that I had been missing to figure out what the series was going to be about, that definitely came to me. Thankfully, it was about like 5 a.m. So it was almost time to get up anyway. But still, I was like, I could have had that extra like 30 minutes, hour of sleep. And they were like, no, it's time to write. Get up.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? How they subconsciously delve into your psyche and go, oh, we have something to say now. So one of my favorite elements of the novel is the Clandestine letter delivery system. I love that. I love the premise of it. I love the reality of it. I think it's brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit more about the historical aspects of a group such as this during World War I?
Sure. And actually, so I found out about these groups when I was researching Broken Lines. And so at the time, Unsettled Shores, this was prior to me writing that scene I told you about, I wasn't really sure what was going to happen in Unsettled Shores. Like, I was more than halfway through Broken Lines. I'm like, okay, I don't know where they're going after this. And then I came across the information for these letter delivery systems. And I was like, that's it. That's what it's going to be about.
Yes.
And so there were two that I found out about, and I'm not even going to try to say the French names. I don't speak French and I'm going to butcher it. So they were called Word of the Soldier and Postal Service of the Allies were the two that I found. Oh. And They primarily were France and Belgium. So those occupied areas, they worked with people there to get letters back and forth across the line. And from what I could read, which actually I couldn't find a ton of information on these groups, so it was kind of nice because I could play with history, was that they helped either party. They were neutral, and they just wanted to get letters to the innocent people, which is what my characters do in Unsettled Shores. But I wanted to kind of take it the next step farther and say, okay, so they're neutral parties, which, as we know, being neutral in such a heated time is really hard. Mm-hmm. So can they really stay neutral or not?
It's kind of situational. Yeah.
Right. So the one thing that when you read Unsettled Shores that it is not true about the groups is that it seemed like they were pretty much just in Europe. And I decided to make them go across to the United States and be a larger organization and to have a lot of people. I have no idea how many people were involved in these groups, but I decided for my purposes to have a whole bunch of people involved. And I also decided to make it, they have code phrases that are all in Latin. Mm-hmm. And so they go between, they deliver these letters between Catholic churches where at the time they would have been speaking Latin for Mass. We don't do that now in Catholic Mass, it's all in the vernacular. But back then it seemed like, okay, I need some code phrases. What would nobody be using? I figured Latin. Nobody's using that. So that's their key language is Latin. And then they have priests and they have pretty much anybody helping them, but you have to kind of know where to look to get your letters delivered.
Which is quite, because these are uncensored letters.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, they're trying to avoid censorship.
Yeah.
Because when you mailed a letter during the war, anything that they considered to be possibly intelligence for the enemy would be blacked out by the censors, and then they'd stamp it with like approved by censor and then whatever your number was. So you'd get this letter in the mail from your loved one and it would have all these black lines on it and you wouldn't know anything. So you really had to be careful when you were writing about what you said and how you said it. And so these groups were trying to make it so that you could be honest with people. Now, granted, just as a disclaimer, I think it's probably good to not put like key intelligence in letters and send them around. But a lot of the things they were blacking out weren't as clear cut as we are going to latitude 45 and we're that kind of thing.
A lot of times the actual men boots on the ground didn't even know.
Right.
They were just being directed on a day-by-day basis, or because the situation was constantly changing as well. So that was actually my favorite reading experience of Unsettled Shores, was the blacked out censored letter that is in the book, because I actually gasped. It hit me so hard that all of a sudden there's just black lines. And I was like, well, but what's in that letter? And I thought, oh my gosh, what would it have been like to have contact from someone you loved and still not know what they were trying to say? And that just hit me so hard. It was shocking, actually. It was very visceral. So I thought, well done. That was really, really well placed. I think I was reading in bed and I went, oh, and I think Dave went, what's wrong? I'm like, oh, nothing.
And the letter in the book is actually, that's the last letter that this character receives. I guess I can say it's Josie, the girl from the prologue, and her father has died. And this is the last letter that she receives from him. And she actually receives it after his death. And she just can't understand, like, he's already dead. The battle was months ago. Like, why wouldn't they just give her those last words of whatever he said. And so that's kind of her motivating factor to join this letter group, is to make sure that other people don't suffer that same thing.
It's a great tie-in. It really is. It got me for sure. So for those of you who don't know, Kelsey's author tagline is historical fiction with a dose of romance and a dash of intrigue. And I can tell you she delivers on both fronts. So you can be sure that there's an element of a love story that exists within Unsettled Shores. When it comes to the romance element, I identified 3 impactful relationships within the story. I know there was more than 3, but I identified with 3 of them, and each of them was very unique and sort of stood on its own, and they were beautiful. Did you have a favorite?
So now you're making me choose between my children.
Characters, I know. But I'm not asking you to kill one off.
Nice. I mean, I liked all of them. They all had things that were fun to write about. But I probably, if I had to pick one, I would probably pick, and if you're watching and you haven't read Broken Lines, block your ears because I'm about to give you a spoiler. So my favorite couple of the 3 was probably Amara and Emil. Yeah. At least my favorite to write, because so they're married in Unsettled Shores and they're having some issues, and like a lot of the issues stem from what happened to them in the previous book, and they just haven't really dealt with it, and the war is finally making them deal with their problems. And so, you know, they're talking, but they're not talking. They're experiencing a lot of the things that I think any married couple goes through. Mm-hmm. And there, in my opinion, are not enough books that deal with, well, what happens after happily ever after? Like, yes. When you're married, like, how do you get through things? So, and I'm also married. So I liked being able to look at that dynamic, because most of my characters, it's about finding the romance instead of keeping the romance.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it is a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of hard conversations and a lot of self-examination and all those things. I mean, to bring 2 people together and have them cohabitate alone is a challenge. Yeah. And we add children to the mix. And
yeah, they don't even have kids.
Level. So, do you have a favorite line in the novel that you would share with us?
Yes. So, and since you forewarned me of this particular question, I marked it down so I didn't have to remember it. But a lot of my favorite lines take place later in, like, towards the end. I'm not going to say those because of the spoilers. But the one I'm going to read, I actually used on my Mother's Day post, if you follow me on any of the social media. And so this particular quote takes place when in Unsettled Shores, Emil is talking to a priest, and they're talking about the possibility of him and Amara adopting children. And
yes, I love this one.
And he says to the priest, "Look at the world, Father. It's falling to pieces. How can I bring a child into such madness?" And the priest replies, "Those children you hope to adopt have already been brought into this world. They will experience it either way. Whether that experience is built on love is the unknown. You ask, how can you raise a child in a world such as this? My question is, how can you not?" And I really like that quote. Me too. Because I think it's very appropriate for the world we're living in today. Absolutely. And I know I'm a parent, you're a parent, and the world right now is a mess. Like, it was a mess 100 years ago, and it's a mess today. And we're just dealing with a lot. And sometimes you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, how can I keep my children from just being ruined by the world? And it's kind of like, well, they're going to experience it either way. Yep. You can't stop that. So you can either just kind of hide and ignore what's going on, or you can teach them to be good people, to go through life with love and grace and kindness, and just, even if nobody else is doing the right thing, teach them to do that. And I think it's good to have that reminder every now and then.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. That line actually came at the perfect time as well in Unsettled Shores, because I was questioning that same concept. And I was so pleased when you brought it to reality. I was like, yes, exactly. That's it. Why wouldn't you? These children already exist and need homes and need to be loved. Why wouldn't you? So yeah, I can see why that was your favorite line. My favorite quote was from the letter that Peter wrote to Amara. And then you used it again in your notes. And the quote is, "You are strong, you are beautiful, you are brave. Life isn't finished with you yet." That is poignant and a great reminder as well for today's world that, for a lot of places, like in the United States, is sort of coming out of the pandemic mode. Kelsey's in the US, I'm in Canada. Canada is in a little bit different situation at the moment. This is our May long weekend starting tonight, and we have Monday as our holiday. And we are still sort of socially distanced, and restaurants for indoor eating and whatnot are still closed until after the May long weekend, until we get an update of where we're at with things. So I think there's a lot of insight, and a lot of reminders that are incredibly valid for today's world. And I have to say that my favorite scene is in chapter 32, when they visit the Psalm. And believe it or not, this is going to sound unintelligent of me. I did not realize, I always just envisioned the Psalm was like a region. I did not realize it was a river until I looked it up. And so I was like, oh. So then I was looking on the map, and it's actually, I wouldn't say it's like incredibly close to, like, it's a little ways away. But then,
Oh, the river from
yeah. So I thought,
and now I'm not sure of this exactly, but I think they might consider it like the region as well as there's a river. But
okay,
I need to look that up.
I always thought it was a region, and then I was like, wait a second, it's a river. And it just changed my idea of, and because I've never been to France either, although I'm thinking that there's a research trip here that we need to go on. Just saying. So that was kind of interesting. So let's talk about this beautiful cover. Look at this. Isn't this stunning? Oops, hang on. The camera's backwards too.
No, it's the right direction.
It's the right direction? Okay.
Yeah.
It's so what readers might not know is that Kelsey actually designs all of her own book covers. And she often does so by incorporating herself into the cover photos. And this continues to amaze me, because when it comes to covers, you first have to have an idea of what you want it to look like, but then to actually make that happen is a whole different level of talent. And Kelsey's talents goes far beyond her writing skills. So can you tell us a little bit about how you bring the process of your covers to fruition? Because all of them are unique, yet they're tied together in the series, but they stand out. They don't look the same, but there's enough of a tie-in. They're so well done. I love it. I pay somebody to do that for me because I do not have that skill.
So when I first, I guess, so 4 books ago, when I was trying to figure out how to do covers, and I should have pulled them out. I should show you some of the covers. Hold on a second.
Okay. We're going to get a sneak peek behind the scenes, maybe into Kelsey's mind.
All right, sorry. I've only got this for this one. All right, so I'm going to use Across Oceans as my example. So
Okay.
I was looking for something that would go across all 3 of them. And just to give you an idea, all right, so this is my final Across Oceans cover for book 1. This was the iteration before it. And this was the first iteration.
Holy crow.
So this is the first version. And I'm having problems.
I know
with
the camera. For us.
There we go.
So you know.
So this is what it first was, and this is what it ended up.
There you go. Oh, it came so far.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So, and I don't have versions printed for all of them, but basically they all go through a process of multiple looks. And when I take photos, so 3 out of the 4 books are me on the cover. And the 4th one is actually my daughter is on the cover, that one. And the picture with her, normally I take the photos outside, but that particular one we took in the bathroom.
Really?
If you can believe it. So Photoshop works miracles.
That's incredible.
And the picture actually
holding the letters and the hat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I had put the like marked by censor or whatever that's on the letter. So I went online, I bought the dress, I bought the hat, and I do that I did that for Broken Lines as well. But Across Oceans, this one, sorry, I'm getting a little off track, but this dress was actually my great grandmother's wedding dress.
I love that.
And I love that I got to use that on there. So I try to incorporate some thematic elements from each of the books within the covers, but also keep it simple enough, because I know, and this was also my mistake when I started, is that a lot of authors want to put everything on the cover. They want it to be exactly what's in the book. And I feel like it's more of like the theme, more of the feel of what you're going to get in the book. Yeah. Obviously, it can't lie about what's in the book, but it sometimes it's very challenging to get what's in your head on the cover.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right. I think it's about the theme. I think it's what is the feel, and the reader should be able to look at a cover and feel that tug of wanting to know more about that story. Mm-hmm. Something in it draws them in. And we do judge books by their cover as much as we'd like to think we don't. We all do it. And heck, I judge wine by its label until I've tried it, and then
and it's a process. Like I take probably 50 or 60 different pictures and poses of, well, I guess my daughter's taking them, but of the person. And then I try a whole bunch of different ones. I try different, like I'll go online and I'll like try different clothes in there until I find out the one I want to actually buy. Different backgrounds, tons of backgrounds go in there.
Usually something separate and you layer it.
Yes. There's I don't know how many layers for Unsettled Shores. That was probably the most simplistic one that just came together at the beginning, but most of the covers are like 35, 45 layers deep with all these little details. And can I promote somebody's book while I'm on here? So I actually just designed the cover for Jennifer Q. Hunt for her book, Some Through the Fire. And she's doing a relaunch of her book with a new cover. So she has that posted up on her Instagram. And I've read it. I would recommend it. So if you're interested in looking at it. Some Through the Fire.
Okay.
Jennifer Q. Hunt.
Jennifer Q. Hunt. Okay. Yes, absolutely. That's excellent. We can always use a new book. It is Friday, so we can read. Filled up. So can you tell us what's up next for you in terms of creation? I know what you're working on.
You know. Tanya gets the inside scoop on these things.
This is like the best part of being a writer, I have to say, is that you get to get the behind the scenes of other writers, because all it does is fuel your own creativity. So it's fabulous. And it's also so much easier to help somebody else come up with their ideas than it is to work on your own. So,
and I would, just to go off of that, so if whoever's watching, if you're like coming into the writing field, go on social media, especially Instagram's been great, and connect with other authors, because I found it's just such a great community and we're all willing to help each other for the most part. Like if you find an author that's not willing to help other authors, that's unusual. So
I would agree. Yeah.
But I've found so many people, and they're very helpful with getting you through your writing journey.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what's next?
So exciting.
Is, and how do I
don't know.
Okay, so my next series, which I'm still figuring out all the details, but my plan is to have hopefully the whole thing, the series generally plotted by the end of the summer. I think it's going to be 5 books, and
or 6.
Anya wants me to make it 6, but we'll see. Let me get through 5 first. So it's going to be about 5 brothers who are from Charleston, South Carolina, and this is in the 1850s. So they're living in the Deep South, and their father has just died and left them the plantation, but they do not want to be a part of that Southern culture of owning slaves and farming. And so they decide that they are going to head west, because this is also the time of the Oregon Trail and wagon trains. And so they head over into Washington Territory, where they're going to kind of create their new town that they're going to call Lark Song. Their last name is Lark. And they're going to basically allow anybody to be part of their community. And if you know history at this time, 1850s, there was a lot of division in our country, in the United States. And so I'm going to try to respectfully touch on some of those topics. We have slavery. We also have everything going on with the Native Americans, and
the West Coast. Yeah.
And their lands being taken away, reservations. And there's also going to be another twist in there involving these brothers and involving the people that they pick up along the way that are coming to their community. And how do I not spoil this? They have some
specialness to them.
Yes, they have some, shall we say, they receive some gifts from their father, and they have to retain these gifts in order to continue their legacy. And the series is really going to be about them figuring out who they are, who else can understand them, and how to keep their legacy safe. Did that work?
It works. Yeah. Without creating any spoilers or anything like that. And because it's so early in the creation process as well, you don't want to.
I don't want to say too much in case it changes.
Exactly. So. Which is with Kelsey's writing process, it literally could change.
But if you're on my newsletters, you'll hear more details as the process continues.
So let me change that banner so that people know how to sign up for your newsletter. So if you go to Kelsey Gietl, Gietl.com.
Yeah, Gietl. Yeah.
Okay. I'm making sure to try and say it properly. I don't actually say your last name very often. You can sign up for Kelsey's newsletter there. All of Kelsey's novels, including Unsettled Shores, don't forget to look for this cover, can be purchased at your favorite online retailers. If you prefer to borrow a copy through the library, sometimes all it takes is to submit a question and a request to your local librarian at your branch. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us today. I really did adore Unsettled Shores, and I do hope everyone will run out and grab a copy. Thanks for watching, everyone, and be sure to give us a thumbs up. And I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button so we can stay up to date with content as it comes out. And until next time, I'm wishing you guys a wonderfully bookish day. See you later.